Hi everybody, today we're looking at what are the signs and signals of self-care. What is it that tells us that we're getting stressed, and what is it that we're aiming for when we're looking at improving our self-care. So if you ask people how they're going, we could draw it on a simple continuum. Here they're going well, and here they're struggling. And most people, what they'd do is they'd put themselves somewhere on that line. Here's how I'm operating at the moment. And so for all of us, we're going to experience pressures. We're going to experience things that put our well-being at risk. And if we can notice the signs of when we're starting to drop, it really gives us a good tool to be able to intervene a lot earlier. And also, if we know the characteristics of what's happening to us, it gives us some great ideas of what we can do to counteract the sorts of things that we're experiencing. So, what are the signs, what are the signals that you're starting to go downhill? Well, obviously, there's behavioural signs, things that you do that show you that you're starting to go downhill. I remember once when I was at home, I was in the kitchen, I was putting things down very heavily. I thought, gee, that made a lot of noise. I was closing drawers and thought, gee, that made a lot of noise. And all of a sudden, I realised that I was angry. So the sign was that I was making a lot of noise. That was the behavioural thing that I was doing. Behind it was a feeling that I was angry. So it really helped me understand what I needed to do for myself when you clue on to things like that. There's going to be physical signs that you're starting towards struggling. You know, you might get uptight, you might get teary, you might start to get butterflies in your tummy or a feeling of fear, you might start to clench your jaw, get headaches, sore shoulders, whatever it is that denotes that physically you're showing some signs that you're under stress. And obviously there's mental ones as well, the sorts of thoughts that go through your head, the worries, the anxieties, the sorts of things that go round and round in your head. And then finally there's the emotional ones as well, the sorts of feelings that you have. So you might start feeling a bit sad, you might start feeling under pressure and stressed. So all those things, the physical, the behavioural, the mental, the physical, the emotional, will give us indications of what's going on for us, and the earlier we can pick up those indicators, the better it is. There's another thing that happens there, and that is that often there's a pattern to how we feel things. So first we'll feel this, and then this will happen, and then the thoughts might come in that this is never going to change, and then we might think, I may as well give up. We have a way of doing stress, we have a way of doing tiredness, we have a way of doing crankiness. You know, whatever it is, we have a pattern that we tend to fall into, a way that we do it that's going to be different to other people around us. So have a think about not just what are the signs and signals for you that you're getting stressed, but what tends to be the pattern, what tends to follow what, and where does that lead to? If you know the pattern, it helps you be able to then pick the pattern and say, yep, I need to stop that there, I need to be careful, I need to put in some of my self-care so that I don't drop any further, or to take care of myself where I am. There's some more things that can really help make a difference to help us understand what's going on here. And so what I'd like to do is draw this. It's like a funnel. When we start getting stressed, when we start moving towards the struggling, when we start getting down here, we start to get, the world starts to narrow in, and we start to get a lot more set in our ways, we start to get a lot more rigid, we start to get uptight. So it's a bit about constricting and closing in. Being down here takes a lot of real estate, it takes a lot of effort, it takes up a lot of space within our way of operating. So it doesn't mean that you can't operate here, it just means that you're operating under this influence. So it's a lot harder, and you'll never be at your absolute best because you've got all this stuff still dragging you down and taking up that real estate that I was talking about. So down here, things start to constrict, they start to move inwards. Up here, it's very different. Up here, there's much more sense of spaciousness, there's much more sense of openness, there's much more sense of having a flow to things, so moving between emotions. There's much more sense of connection to other people, where down here there's more an isolation and coming in on yourself, and maybe a neediness or a fragmentation, both within yourself and also towards you and those that you know and the outside world. Here, it's very different. You're more light-hearted, and you're more able to see a bigger picture of what's going on. So what we can do is we can start to understand what are the characteristics of these different places for us? What are the characteristics of being down here? What are the characteristics of being up here? So that when we start to see or notice ourselves getting overly focused on something, and our mind has been on a really narrow bandwidth for a while, it starts to lead into the characteristics of being too overly focused. So it's a good idea then to just step back and to widen your perspective and to take a breath and say, yeah, okay, I need a bit of a rest from what's happening for me. When we start to get caught up in things in our mind, similarly, we can say, okay, I've noticed that this is starting to go round and round and round. That's a characteristic of being down here. Maybe I can do something about that. Another characteristic that you often see of going towards struggling is that you lose that inner stability. You get thrown within yourself, so you're not centered anymore. So you might become more fragile, but you really lose that inner steadiness that you've got. Up here, you've got a lot more steadiness, and you've got a lot more sense of self. So, what I encourage is that you have a look at what are the characteristics that lead you towards going down. What are the signs for you? What are the characteristics of well-being? There's one more thing I'd like to mention here just before we finish off, and that is when you're up here, when you're in this space up here, it doesn't mean that you're going to be happy all the time. Here's where you have that underlying sense of well-being. Here's where you have that characteristic of being steady in yourself and being open. You can still feel sad, you can still feel hurt. I remember I was talking to someone once, and they were a manager of a service, and they're talking about things that were happening in their service, and they were really frustrated. You know, they were frustrated about things that were blocking them, and how people weren't acting in ways that were helpful, and you could hear the frustration in their voice. And then they talked about something that was really sad that was happening for them, and tears came to their eyes because it was just something that touched them really deeply and was very sad. And then they talked about something that was funny, so something that made them laugh, and you could see the smile on their face. And then finally they talked about something that was inspiring to them, about how they were helping someone really build their skills and build their capacity and move up into a position that they hadn't done before, but they believed that they could do it. What this person had was up here. It was well-being, because they were able to move through all those different emotions. They were able to be sad when they were sad. They were able to be happy when they were happy. Well-being isn't just about being happy. It's about being able to flow and spacious in those emotions. So, what does well-being mean for you? What are the things that make a difference to your well-being when you start to see the sorts of pressures that are on you, and start to see the sorts of things that might lead you towards going down? What are the things that help sustain you and give you indicators that here you're starting to stabilise and mobilise again and move out of what's happening? So have a think about that for the next next few days until the next video comes out, and go well.